This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd rather make a one-time contribution, you can do that via check or PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And I want to give a special thank you to Jonathan Tyndall and Tom Bondi, who both just made one-time contributions to the show. Tom writes, Dave, a few ducats in appreciation of the podcast. Thank you for introducing me to the writings of China Mieville and Philip K. Dick. So big thanks again to Jonathan Tyndall and Tom Bondi, and to everyone else who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so now let's get to our show.
Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 456 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Our guest today is Denis Loubet. He was the first artist hired at Origin Systems, where he created art for the classic Ultima and Wing Commander series of video games. He's also worked as an artist for Steve Jackson Games, Hero Games, King's Isle Entertainment, TKO Software, and Pixel Mine Games. And we'll be speaking with him today about Andrea Cantato's new book, Through the Moongate, the story of Richard Garriott, Origin Systems Inc. and Ultima, Part 2, from Wing Commander and Ultima 7 to Portalarium. And we previously discussed Part 1 of Through the Moongate back in episode 426, so definitely check that out if you missed it. And now here's our interview with Denis Loubet. All right, so we're here with Denis Loubet. Welcome to the show.
Hey, howdy.
Okay, so I mentioned over email that my girlfriend Steph is doing an MFA at Texas State. And it says on Facebook that you went to Texas State. So I was just wondering what your experience was like there.
Southwest Texas State University. That's what it was called when I was there. It was fine. I mean, I did my 4 years. I didn't get a degree or anything. I took all the art courses I could, but they were trying to teach me how to be a gallery painter, and that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an illustrator.
So what was it like in San Marcos back then?
Oh, it was great. I mean, the campus was all built on hills, and sometimes not the best architectural choices here and there. They had a library that had, upper story wings that couldn't support books. So it was weird.
You're saying it would fall, the building would fall.
The building would collapse if they tried to put all the books on the outside wings, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was the original intent, so it did not work.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty serious liability for a library.
Yeah.
And so then you said in an interview, you said that some of your first work appeared in, you said, quote, a local rag there in San Marcos.
Oh,
some
yeah.
Star Wars.
Oh, gosh, what was it called? I can't remember the name of it. It was a little free, newspaper thing. And I did some pencil portraits of the characters from Star Wars from photographs. I discovered that, working from photographs, you can easily get photographic realism. So, yeah.
So then you said also that you ended up in Houston after that?
Yeah, I traveled to Houston to try and get a, quote, real job, unquote, and ended up working in as a darkroom technician. Which, was kind of dull, but it wasn't all bad because occasionally we'd get negatives from NASA. And so I don't know, but I may have handled negatives from the moon. I don't know. But we got some. We got some negatives of the lunar surface and stuff taken from the lunar surface, and I, printed up what they wanted printed up.
And then you came back to Austin after that?
Yes, I wasn't. I came back to visit friends who wanted to take me to a SCA event, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And I went to that, and strangely enough, Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games was the local Baron. And so he was on his little barony throne, and people were paying their respects to him. And so my friends pushed me to show him the cover, the demon painting I did, of the demon coming out of the pentagram. And Steve said, "Ooh, I want that for my the Space Gamer magazine cover." And I said, "Okay." And it's like we executed the sale right there on the spot for $180. That was my first professional sale.
So, if people don't know, could you just describe what an SCA event looks like? I mean, he was dressed up as a lord or something?
Yes. Dressed up in medieval garb, had a circlet around his head to indicate his status, and they had big tables set up and as genuine medieval food as they could, legally provide and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. Everybody was dressed up in medieval regalia and stuff. It was pretty neat. I had borrowed an outfit from my friends.
Did you go to a lot of events like that?
I went to a few. I was there for a while. It wasn't the best thing, of course. A lot of politics and infighting and stuff like that. But still, it was fun.
But not fighting with swords. You mean like fighting like with words?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you get a group like that, and there's going to be internal struggles and stuff like that. But sure, yeah, there was putting the armor on and whacking each other with rattan weapons and stuff like that. Sure, that was cool.
So what was Steve Jackson Games like at that time? Like, what was it in an office? Or?
It was operating out of his house. And so I originally hired on as the typesetter, kind of in-house artist. And, as soon as they got and I was typesetting with a Selectric typewriter. That's the kind of typewriter that has the little insane golf ball thing with all the letters on it that's flying around, slapping the paper and stuff. And boy, that was a heck of a challenge. And basically we'd cut out the paragraphs that we'd type up, and we'd run them through a machine that would put wax on the back, and then we'd paste them up onto heavier stock to be photographed.
And so I've heard you say that then one day Richard Garriott came to visit Steve Jackson Games, right? So tell us about that.
Yes. Well, Richard was in the SCA, and so he knew Steve Jackson. And so, his character's name was Shamano. And so he came to visit Steve to show off his game that he was working on called Ultima 1. Or Ultima. He didn't know it was going to be 1. And when he came into Steve's house and was showing him the game, he saw the work I was doing for Steve and went, "Ooh, I need an artist for the cover." And so that's how I ended up contracting to do being commissioned to do the cover for Ultima 1. And right on the spot, he had me do the startup screen for Ultima 1, which was an outline of a heraldic lion. And so he set up, he had an Apple IIe right there, and he set it up, and he had a Apple II graphics tablet. And it was this big sheet metal thing with a pen attached by a wire. The pen rattled. It was not the best construction tolerances. And I traced off a heraldic dragon on the graphics tablet. Thing was, the the power coming through the wall outlet was uneven, was not clean. And so the power spikes came through as actual spikes in the line I was trying to draw. And so I'd constantly have to go back, erase, and draw and redraw the line, hoping that another spike wouldn't occur in that moment. So that was exciting.
Yeah. So I think I told you over email that I just read this book, Through the Moongate, the story of Richard Garriott, Origin Systems Inc., and Ultima Part 2 from Commander and Ultima 7 to Portalarium by Andrea Cantato. So a couple of the things I'm going to ask about are from that.
Sure.
And so one thing is there's a quote in here where Richard mentions that Origin at the time was the only game developer or publisher in the entire central United States. And did you have any sense at the time, like, that this was a great scene, that you were, how lucky it was that there was like Origin and Steve Jackson games and all these things in this, one little city where you were living?
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, we referred to Steve Jackson games at that time as, Steve Jackson University, because basically you'd go there, you'd learn the craft of, game design and the skills necessary to put together a game, and then you'd go off and start your own gaming company or work for someone else or something like that. It was sort of a, you'd have to go through Steve Jackson games to get in the gaming industry. It felt like that. And the same thing held true for Origin. In its early days, it was like, and now it's Origin University. You go there to know how to do computer games and stuff. So it was pretty wild. I did some early stuff. Well, there was a period where I wasn't working for Origin, but I was doing a lot of work for Richard Garriott, not as an employee, but as a contractor. And so I did the cover for, Ultima 1, I did the cover to Exodus. I think Ultima 4, I did the cover for that one as a contractor, commissioned. And I also did some other stuff because he first put out his games through California Pacific. So yeah, I did various covers for like Caverns of Callisto and Apolloids and stuff like that for Richard and for California Pacific.
So if you were just a contractor, you weren't because Origin had an office, right?
They had an office in New Hampshire at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when we were doing the illustrations, the manual illustrations for like Ultima 4, they flew me up there. And I did the manual illustrations. And then they flew me back, luckily enough.
So you were like sitting in an office somewhere in New Hampshire?
Yes, when I did those illustrations, yes.
Because, Ultima 4 was the first of the Ultima games that I played, and it still has some of the most amazing packaging I've ever seen in a computer game. And I was just looking through so it comes with these two booklets, and one is kind of like the history of Britannia, and one it looks like a spell book. It has this sort of leather cover and everything. And there are a lot of illustrations in there.
Yeah, pretty much almost all the different spells. Oh yeah, that took like, a week or so. A lot of illustrations. I going there, I knew I was going to have to turn out a lot of pictures real fast, so I came up with a pretty good means of doing an assembly line to do the pictures, and I ripped the outfits out of the costumes that the people were wearing out of period costume books and stuff. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the costumes because, the sort of the norm in fantasy art, it seems to me at this time, would be the sort of Frank Frazetta, Boris Vallejo kind of bodybuilders in skimpy outfits, both men and women. And looking through the Ultima 4 book, the characters are all, they have realistic proportions and all their clothing and equipment is all very practical and everything. And,
Yeah.
and a lot of the outfits even look sort of, like they look like nuns' habits or like Old Testament prophets and
Right.
things like that.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to give it a different feel, a different flavor. And that held true for the computer graphics I did while I was at Origin. I mean, I tried, in games like Knights of Legend, they had these little tableau scenes, and I would work on the Apple IIe version of that. And you had like, black, white, purple, orange, green, and blue. I would have killed for yellow. But thing is, most people were handling it, were doing art in that system like they were doing a comic book. They'd do black outlines and then they'd fill with a color. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to paint with light. I'm not going to have any outlines really. I'm going to have, a character against a background and just have, light and shadow and stuff like that define the form and things. And I thought that was pretty different.
Well, I think it's so important too to setting the tone of the game, because the game has in my memory, it has such the sense of gravitas, which you wouldn't have with the chicks in chainmail kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
And also the art in the actual game is basically just stick figures when you're talking about Ultima 4. So your entire concept of who these characters are and what they look like and what the world looks like, the illustration is so important to that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Richard didn't have an objection because he'd been in the SCA. He knew what medieval warriors looked like. And they weren't the, Frank Frazetta, super muscular, things like that. So, yeah, it all worked.
Yeah, so I loved those. I love those interior line illustrations, and then just the covers that you painted for Ultimas 4 and 5 and 6 are just some of my favorite pieces of art I've ever seen. And so I want to just go through each of those. So Ultima 4, it's this man in a white robe at the coast with the waves crashing around him, holding up a glowing staff toward the sky.
Right.
Could you, what did Richard tell you? Like, what kind of directives did he give you for that?
Oh gosh, what did he want for that? He wanted somebody against an ocean, I think. And yeah, he definitely wanted the character facing away from the viewer so that you could then imagine your own face on the character. And but yeah, it must have been as simple as, a guy on a rock facing the ocean. And so that's what I did.
Because I always wondered if that figure was meant to be the player character or if it was meant to be Lord British, because as you say, you're just seeing the back of the figure's head.
Oh, I had assumed it was the player character, but we really I really hadn't nailed down the look of the avatar or anything like that yet.
I mean, I drew a lot growing up, and so I feel like like most art I look at, I can sort of imagine being able to do it if I worked hard enough at it. But this pose of this character on the Ultima 4 cover, mm-hmm. I could never get that right. I don't think it just looks like such a difficult pose to draw. Like, was it, or maybe?
Yeah, a bit. What was hard was at that time I was still, I was early in my art career. I was still fighting with my materials, and that cover wasn't everything I wanted it to be. None of my covers are, but the wrinkles on the cloth and stuff. Boy, I'd do that totally different now and stuff. So,
I mean, I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, all the robes in the interior illustrations and then this robe on the cover as well just have so much detail, so much embroidery and things. I mean, you were definitely not taking the easy way out there.
Yeah. But the pose, I just drawn a lot of characters up to that point, so I kept hacking at it till it looked good. That's basically.
But you were just drawing it freehand, or did you have any sort
drawing it freehand.
Yeah, no, I'm very impressed. Okay, so then Ultima 5, there are two heroes, one dressed in red and one dressed in green, in a dark forest, facing off against these three black figures.
Three Shadow Lords.
Black-robed figures.
Uh-huh.
So do you remember anything about how that piece came?
Richard wanted a definite, cover with facing off against the Shadow Lords, with Shamino having been shot by a magical arrow, a magical bolt, and he wanted that cover to have pathos. And so, yeah, I went for, that kind of stage lighting sort of look, where the light was shining down on the guy with the arrow and the avatar, and leaving the three figures in the dark in the background in the brooding forest. And the artist that set me on my career way back when I was like a little kid was Frank Frazetta. Long ago, I saw the cover for Conan the Adventurer. I was like, 10 or 12, and I went, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to make pictures like that. And so in my nod to Frazetta, there's a gnarled branch on that Ultima 5 cover, and that's my nod to Frazetta. Thank you, for my career, basically. I never spoke to him, but it was like his work inspired me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of I hadn't thought about it, but the way that Shamino is sort of curled or sort of lying by the leg of the avatar is kind of like the way that Frank Frazetta would have a woman.
Yes, he goes
sort of lying beside the.
That's right. He's very much into the the romance look, the dramatic lighting and pathos of the scene. Yeah, he's all that.
I mean, one thing that, like, looking at it now, the thing that really strikes me is just how beautifully the chainmail is painted, and you even see this sort of like how it's kind of bunching up around the back of the avatar's neck in a very, very realistic way. Is it hard? I would imagine it's hard to paint chainmail, or
I hate chainmail, and I have to paint it a lot. So it's so hard to get right. Oh God. Yeah, chainmail is my personal nemesis. So yeah, definitely.
Do you have any tips and tricks for other artists who are trying to paint chainmail?
Oh, don't try to do every link. It's that way lies madness. It's find a way. Oh, God, I look at the way Mike Mignola does chainmail in the Hellboy comics and stuff. He basically has it. You only see little slanted lines indicating individual links just at the edge of the light, where it's going from light to shadow. And it's like, oh man, that's an economy of line, and it just says chainmail, and it's so easy. It's like, damn, yeah, do that.
I guess that probably applies to a lot of art. If you can't draw something, just have it be in heavy shadow, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yes. Well, it's weird. I mean, I went on a round the world trip on my sabbatical when EA bought Origin, and I visited the Louvre in Paris. And I was looking at a painting, and the hand on one of the characters in this classical painting looked weird. And I got up close and I studied it, and I could see where the artist had tried it, said, no, that sucks, had painted over it, tried to do the hand again. No, that sucks. He probably painted over it again, then did another hand, and he wasn't satisfied, but he said, screw it. It's good enough. And so I went, oh, well, these big medieval painters, these classical painters, they weren't such different from me. They fought with their materials too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then the Ultima 6 cover, it's this warrior in white, looking very holy, standing over a defeated gargoyle, a sort of red-skinned monster with his foot on its chest. It's, it's dead.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of golden light shining down from above. So do you remember what your directives were on that piece?
Pretty much that. I mean, that cover was the most direct from Richard's brain to the canvas. He described, the three elements: the guy, the gargoyle, and the light coming down, and that was pretty much it. And so I went, okay, and did that, and chose a low angle so the avatar would look real impressive, towering over the defeated gargoyle. And that was fun. That was one of the first paintings I did for Origin that was done on Herculean drafting film rather than poster board or canvas or anything like that. Herculean drafting film is this translucent film used for drafting. And it allows you to, I draw a sketch on a piece of paper, then I tape it to the back of the Herculean drafting film, and the sketch shows through the Herculean drafting film. Then I can paint directly on the Herculean because it's got a nice tooth to it, and I paint with acrylics on that, and it's great. I'm not destroying the sketch.
Now, the story in Ultima 6 has a big twist to it. Did you know the story and the twist when you painted that picture?
I think I did. I didn't pay that much attention to it. When you're making the sausage, you don't usually eat it. So when I was doing the artwork for the Origin games, working for Origin, I wasn't really playing them. So I never played Ultima 6. Now, I played Ultima 1. I played Ultima 3. I think I must have played Ultima 2. But when I started, and I played Ultima 4, and that was mind-boggling. That was really good. I mean, the whole idea of the virtues was brilliant. But I think Ultima 4 was the last one I played. I might have played 5, I don't know. But after that, nah. I'd see a lot of the artwork during development and, hear what was going on in the game as you develop it. So there's no mysteries. And it's like, yeah.
Well, so the reason I ask is because I think that this cover plays a really interesting role in the game, which is that it's all part of this sort of con to make you think that the gargoyles are evil and you're the great hero and you're going to just kill all the gargoyles and save the world. Right. And actually, as the game progresses, I mean, sorry, spoiler warning for Ultima 6, but you find out that there's been this big cultural misunderstanding and that your goal in the game is actually to forge a peace between the two hostile factions.
And that was completely deliberate.
Yeah. But so I was wondering if, because I, knowing that, the picture seems to me to have a kind of like a little bit of like a propaganda poster character to it. I was just wondering if that was in your minds at all when you were painting it.
Exactly. Yeah, that was absolutely deliberate. I'm glad you got that because that's exactly what I intended.
Yeah. I mean, still one of the biggest the moments that hit me the hardest in ever playing a video game is that toward the end of the game, you're interacting with the gargoyles and learning about their culture and things, and you find it's like their Bible, their like holy book, And it just describes in the game, but it says that their holy book has a gargoyle warrior with his foot on the chest of a slain human.
Right.
It's the inversion of that cover that you painted. And that's always just gave me chills, that idea that these two societies each had their own narratives and that they were mirror images of each other.
Right. And, I think I think I came up with the architecture they had, their weird slanted walls.
Yeah, they have kind of like pyramid buildings.
Yeah. I think I came up with that, to make them different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's super cool. Okay, so a couple more quotes. These are some quotes again from Andrea Cantado's book I wanted to ask you about. So one of them, it says, according to Al Nelson, quote, the Origin art department owed much to the deep Austin tradition of poster art and album covers, ads, and T-shirt designs in support of the music industry. And it goes on to talk about that. Do you agree with that? Did you feel?
Oh, yeah. We hired a lot of people from Austin, and a lot of those had previously worked in the music industry doing posters and stuff. We had Michael Priest, famous artist, no longer with us, sadly. But yeah, we had a host of artists that were, signature artists in the Austin music scene.
Were there any particular pieces of art that were produced for Origin that you think you can see clearly, like, oh yeah, this owes something to a album cover or T-shirt or poster or something like that?
Strangely, not so much. They were the Ultimas and the games they were working on pretty much had decided on the look that they were going to have, and yeah, the Austin music scene poster look wouldn't have worked. But it was fun because I got to hire some of them because I was the first artist working at Origin. And so, I was looking at the portfolios and stuff, and we'd have to teach them, okay, here's how you do the art on the computer.
Well, yeah. I mean, it says in this book that Origin was really the first place, or the first big place, to take people who were artists and then teach them to use computers, rather than taking people who knew computers and trying to teach them to do art.
Exactly. Yeah, I figured if they were an artist, they knew what looked good. That's what I was really looking for. If you know what looks good, then you can achieve that with different tools. But if you don't know what looks good, you're never going to be a great artist. So, yeah.
Yeah, because it talks about how Origin was really the first place making games to really specialize. And this person, Jeff George, says, I'm about 99% sure that I was the first person hired as a full-time writer by a computer game company in the world. So this was really innovative, taking these people from different artistic specialties and bringing them together.
Yeah. There were a lot of incredibly creative people. In the early days, it was like, Origin was like, 12 people. Our entire offices were like one corridor in an office building. And I could keep track of everything that happened. And, but soon Origin, got 300, became a juggernaut with 300 employees, and there was no way you could keep up with all the different projects going on.
There's this story I wanted to ask you about where there was one artist apparently who was colorblind, and it says, like, he once completed some nice portraits of what we assumed were aliens until it was shown that he had used the wrong colors.
Not surprising.
Do you remember that happening, or?
No, I wasn't directly involved in that, but I heard that he, they gave him a palette to work with and told him these are the colors, and so he basically, they gave him pre-made colors, and he worked with those to create the final portraits and stuff. And that's cool because, boy, just you're working by rote. You're going, okay, I want a flesh tone. I have to use this even though it doesn't look like flesh tone to me. That's got to be, you're trusting the people who gave you the palette that you're working with. That's
I guess
cool.
it says that they all kind of looked like just shades of gray to him. And
right.
Yeah. I think that's so cool, though, that you could be colorblind and still work as a professional artist. So.
Yeah, well, the thing was, I mean, that would have been a lot harder that would have been somewhat harder if it had been, the modern painting programs today. But in back then, you only had like 256 colors to work with. And so you could reserve, this part of that 256 colors are the skin tones. And then you could go, okay, I'll just work with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was definitely, I get the sense of, that you were really working with these very strict limitations in the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this thing about how you did this animation sort of rendered scene for Serpent Isle.
Oh, yeah.
It would have taken like 5 extra discs to include it. You had to
Yes.
modify it.
Yes, it was crazy. Well, first off, when I first began, the art tools were so crude that it would take a lot of time to do enough art to satisfy the needs of the game. But then the storage medium got to the point where, what was it? It was like it traded off. We got 3D programs that then allowed us to make more art than we could ship. And then you got CDs that then, now even with 3D, we were struggling to fill those up with animations. And so it was like this give and take. The artist, we could either not produce enough or we would produce too much.
Well, because I heard you saying, I thought it was so funny that in that scene, there's a ship and it sails through these big pillars in the ocean.
Yeah.
And in the version that I grew up with, it's like in the Arctic. And
right.
You can watch the original and there's all these waves.
Yeah.
And you said that you actually just had to make it ice so that it wouldn't be moving because it would take up less space that way.
Yep. So they could compress it. Yeah. Otherwise, they'd have to back up the truck with the discs, It's like...
I always wondered about that because there is no polar region in the world of Ultima 7, the explorable game world. So then I was like, wait, where is this exactly?
It's all a single biome.
I just want to ask you about, so this is another excerpt from the book. It says, being new and a little known also due in part to the high cost of the software, 3D Studio did not catch on quickly. One of the first artists to work in this new medium was Denis Loubet, whose experiments later became the animation of the Guardian's face that emerges from the TV screen in the introduction of the Black Gate. Could you talk about that?
Well, originally I was trying to do work with a program called Lightwave. And I found that to be real difficult because they really separated out the modeling and the texturing and the animation into like completely different programs. And 3D Studio kind of had them a little more coherent, more attached to each other. And so worked with 3D Studio and it worked pretty well. Sometimes I do the modeling in Lightwave because Lightwave had great modeling tools. And then I would animate those models in 3D Studio. I'd texture them and animate them in 3D Studio. And the gargoyle was interesting, trying to do lip sync. Back in that day and age was a real challenge.
Well, let me just explain for people who haven't played the game. So you're in the game, you're sitting at your computer, and then the screen sort of turns this weird sort of blue shifting pattern, and then this red face like tries to push through it, and you see sort of like the tip of the nose and the brow, and then it pulls back and pushes through a few times, then comes through.
Yep. And
so you had modeled the Guardian's 3D face, and then you had some sort of
I just pushed it through a flat surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked great. But and then I animated the thing talking as best I could with as few frames as I could, because all those were full screen frames, and it was like, wow, that takes a lot of disk space, and so I had very few frames to work with. Very few phonemes.
Was it a thing where Richard said to you, "We need a guy pushing his face through the screen," and you thought, oh, 3D would be good for this? Or were you like doing stuff in 3D and said like, oh, look, here's an effect we could do, and that got worked into the story?
Yeah, I said 3D would be good for it, for animation, because then you don't have to. I suppose I could have done it drawing, but man, I was not a traditional animator, and I could animate 3D models a lot easier than drawing the face a million times.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you about this. So it says that the story of Serpent Isle, actually, I don't know if you would have been involved in this or not, but it said that the story in Serpent Isle was partially inspired by the Tim Powers novel On Stranger Tides.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really like Tim Powers. He's one of my favorite authors. And I know that novel also inspired Secret of Monkey Island. So that's a pretty good track record for one fantasy novel. But I was just wondering if you did you know that? Or
no, I had. First time I've heard of it.
Yeah. Do you read like fantasy and science fiction novels, or? Oh
gosh, yes, lots and lots.
Yeah. Like, who would be some of your favorite authors?
Oh my gosh, I liked my Larry Niven, and read a lot of Robert A. Heinlein in the early years, and Stephen Baxter, though he's very much a downer. Greg Egan, I like a lot. His novel Diaspora is just awesome.
But so more like hard science fiction than fantasy? Or?
Yeah, more hard science fiction. But I read all the Tolkien, enjoyed the hell out of that. I read all the Conan. I enjoyed the hell out of that. I read a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Right now I'm reading some what people would call second tier author fantasy novels and stuff. So yeah, I'm having fun.
All right, let me ask you about this. So it talks in this book about how Richard would have these big Halloween parties and haunted houses and stuff like that.
Yes.
And one of the things it says, that event was known as Thunderdome, which was a direct reference to the third film in the Mad Max series. After Thunderdome's unintended masses, Richard had to rein it in a bit, and above all, limit the number of guests.
Uh-huh.
Were you around for that? Were you?
Oh, yeah. I was there for all those things. I was usually playing a character in the spook houses.
What kind of characters would you play?
Well, I came up with a good death costume. I had a part of a plastic skull and a huge long black robe, and I put little LEDs in the eyes, and so and had a big scythe, and so yeah, I'd be Death, and I'd use my Death voice, where I'd speak on the inhale, and it would turn out like this, and so it was bizarre.
So did anybody ever get really scared by you?
Well, little kids, yeah. But I'm a tall guy, and so this the black robe and stuff looked pretty impressive at times. So yeah.
Uh-huh. There's also, they quote in this book somebody, Stuart Marks, saying that Richard took him spelunking. He says, quote, "Yeah, we're meeting at the caves at midnight. Wear clothes you want to throw away afterwards." Did you ever go spelunking?
I never went spelunking. However, he did talk me out of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Oh, wow.
And so, yes, I skydived once, and that was cool. That was pretty neat. And it's not as frightening as, at least to me, it wasn't as frightening as I thought it would be, because basically the ground is so far away that it doesn't look like a threat. There's no, it's just a background. And so it's like, Oh, sure, okay. I'll let go and fall away from the airplane. Luckily, I had an instructor strapped to my back, and so we did this. Is that called a tandem jump, or is that?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not an expert. But.
The main reason I never did it again was, well, one, I didn't feel the need to. You know, I can mark it off my bucket list now. But the other was that, oh my gosh, hanging from those straps, it's all on your groin. It's really painful.
Was that in Austin you did that, or did you have to go out somewhere else?
No, it's pretty much in Austin. Not the city proper, of course, but yeah, the outskirts of Austin. Yeah. It was cool.
So how, talk about, kind of what are you up to these days in terms of the Ultima fan community and art and stuff like that?
Well, I'm keeping up with what the Ultima Dragons, which are the old Ultima fan base, and keeping up with what they're doing. And they've got a lot of, various projects. The Ultima fans have various projects going on, doing their own Ultima game, Ultima-ish games. I have a Patreon that I've done various pieces of art for. I did a cover for Ultima 7 that never was. Basically, if they hadn't gone for the black cover, I might have done this as the cover. And so I did a painting that has the avatar and his party looking very morose and stuff, because Ultima 7 started up with that huge murder and everything, and so it was like, yeah, not an uplifting game. So
a couple of weeks ago I interviewed Mark Lemmert, who did Nox Archaist, and I know that which is an Apple II Ultima style game.
Uh-huh.
And I know you did the cover for his instructions book.
That was fun.
So did he just reached out to you and said, "I'd like you to do this"? Or
yeah, well, I'm the titular artist for Ultima, for everything Ultima, and so it's like, yeah, people reach out to me when they're doing something that they want that Ultima flavor, and more often than not, I'll go, okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Well, it seems like you're pretty like in the Ultima Dragons Facebook page and stuff. It seems like you're pretty active.
Yeah. And but right now, I have to catch up on bills and debt, and so I'm doing work for a friend of mine who runs a company called Passmore VR, and I'm designing products.
Like headsets? Or?
No, strangely, they don't have that much to do with VR. I'm designing the outside cases for products. One is a pandemic cam that's mounted on a wall, and it can do a first look at a person and determine whether they're healthy or not. It uses it just looks at you with a camera. It determines how pale you are, your temperature and stuff, and it can use its AI to do a first pass, flag you as this person is not healthy.
Yeah, well, that certainly sounds like that could come in handy.
Yeah, so I did a housing for that, and I did a housing for a robot that wanders around buildings and scans the interiors. I I'm doing one for a cart that projects onto walls and ceilings. So it's bizarre. It's challenging. I'm doing this all in 3D Studio, which is not really a CAD program, but I'm forcing it to be one. And everyone seems happy with what I'm doing. So I'm catching up with bills and debt. Still in the process of that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I also wanted to ask you about how did you get involved with the atheist community in Austin? Because it looks like you've appeared on many programs.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Well, I realized I was atheist in high school when I realized what the definition was, and I went, oh, I fit that definition. Okay, cool. But when I was working at Origin, Jeff D., an artist who had worked a lot for TSR and made his own, designed his own game called Villains and Vigilantes, he came to work for Origin. I hired him, and his wife Manda came along, and she worked for Origin. And so he's a game designer, an artist game designer, and did a lot of work for Origin. But oh gosh, what was the question again?
Just how did you get involved with the atheist community?
He was big in the atheist community, and I basically followed him into the atheist community of Austin, where we did a show called The Nonprofits.
So do you have any memory, do any moments from doing the show stick out in your mind?
Stick out? Well, not really that much. I imagine if we had been a call-in show, there would have been standout moments. But basically, we were just, news and, just blathering our own opinions on stuff. And that was entertaining, but we did have some guests. I mean, at one point, I was working with Matt Dillahunty on the Nonprofits, and we had an astronomer come in, a professional astronomer who had recently made the news, and had an interview with him. It was really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of Matt Dillahunty, it looks like you've appeared a bunch of times on his show, The Atheist Experience. And
a few times.
Called Talk Heathen that you've been on.
Yeah,
and those are call-in shows, I think. Right?
Yes, and those are interesting because do you want me to actually describe a call?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because it was like one person asked, well, why aren't you out doing horrible things if there's no ultimate punishment? And, I had to respond, well, would you be out doing these horrible things if not for the strictures of your God, of your religion? And he said, yes. Now, I don't believe him, really. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say I don't believe you, because I think you're just saying that so to avoid losing that part of your argument. But the fact that the person's willing to paint themselves as a monster to win a debate point is kind of weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a startling admission, and I went, whoa. I'm glad I don't get sucked into these weird beliefs.
So if I wanted to get involved with the atheist community here in Austin, are there meetings or things? Maybe not during the pandemic.
Not during the pandemic, but yeah, the Atheist Community of Austin is the parent organization, and they pretty much are involved in all the different shows that come out of Austin, the Nonprofits, the Atheist Experience, and all the rest. Yeah, and so I think it's atheist-community.org is what you want to go to, and that'll have all the info.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Because I've been looking for things to do, in Austin, like my girlfriend and I, we moved here about a year ago, so we kind of just been locked in our apartment the whole time that we've lived here. But I've been kind of putting together a list of things,
right?
To do once the pandemic, or once the lockdowns lifted and everything. So actually, everyone from Austin that I've interviewed, I've asked, what should I check out that would be of interest to fantasy and science fiction fans in Austin,
right?
Once the pandemic's over. Yeah,
the ACA also has a Austin Free Thought Library on is it 2222? Yeah. So they have a central building that has like a studio in it and stuff where they shoot their shows.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So I guess I never thought about where exactly. So all the shows are shot in the same studio. All the shows.
Yeah. Well, they were.
Yeah.
But all their equipment is still there, and they're still doing they're still doing a lot of the technical stuff from the building. So that's good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I wanted to ask you too. In Ultima 7, there's this group called the Fellowship, which preaches the values of unity, trust, and worthiness. And you sort of see as the game progresses that they're actually kind of a dangerous cult, and that those values have sort of a sinister side to them.
Sure.
And I was just wondering if there were any conversations while you were there that, that this might help people, arm themselves mentally against cults or, weird ideas. People who played the game.
I don't know. I didn't play the game, so I haven't. I never encountered how those were presented and how it changed over the course of the game. So I can't really speak to that. And it wasn't described to me.
Okay. Well, you should play the games. They're really good.
Oh, I'll have to try that. That sounds good.
And terrific artwork too.
Oh, so. Thanks. How much did I do on Ultima 7? I don't know. I'll have to review.
Yeah.
I did a lot of work on the tiles for Ultima 5, and that was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're pretty much out of time. So I guess, do you have just any other final thoughts or any other projects you're working on that you want to let people know about?
Not at the moment. One story that's good from Origin is when we were working on Wing Commander. There was one moment when we knew it would be a success, and that was when the playtesters fell out of their chairs. I mean, I was working at my computer doing some art, and I hear a thump from the playtest room. And we go in there, and the guy's picking himself up and turning his chair back up, and basically he had tried to dodge a ship coming right at him. He had dodged to the side and fallen out of his chair. And we went, and I thought to myself, holy crap, this is a winner. So Wing Commander, yeah.
Well, I heard you telling a story that in Wing Commander you fly through these asteroid fields, like in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
That the asteroids were just rocks from the parking lot.
Yes.
That you picked up and drew.
Yeah, I would hold them at different angles and draw them, and then play them in. Then the programmers would play them in sequence. And there's, when you blow up one of the ships, there's a fragment of wing that flies off, and I made that out of swizzle sticks and note cards, and then rotated it and drew it in different angles. And so I guess that's sort of traditional animation there. So yeah.
I actually, because I was looking this up, it was the Origin office was at 110 Wild Basin Road.
Yes, it was at one time at 110 Wild Basin Road. Yeah, we didn't have all that much room there.
So were there other offices that you worked at in Austin?
Oh, well,
Origin offices?
We went to we then moved on to take up an entire office building on, 183, just off of 183. And that's when we had, that's when Origin was at its height, and we had 300 people and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I definitely want to make a little pilgrimage to all those when I can.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I saw there's a photo when you were working on Savage
Empire?
Worlds of Old Savage Empire.
Yeah.
Where it's like the whole development group is like in this little jungle.
Yeah, that was the Wild Basin location. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. No, I'd love to check that out. But yeah, how would I find the one that was off 183? How would I find out the address for that?
Oh, man. I don't know. I'd have to go track that down for you.
All right. Well, maybe sometime later you can shoot me an email.
Absolutely.
Because it's just cool. It's just cool for me to just go and see where the magic happens.
This is where it happened. These are the hallowed halls. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So why don't we wrap things up there?
All right.
So we've been speaking with Denis Loubet, and you should all go check out his artwork over at denisloubet.com.
That's right.
So Denis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And that was our interview. So big thanks again to Denis Loubet for joining us on the show. And remember that Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please sign up to give us $1 or $2 per episode over at patreon.com/geeks. And if you'd rather make a one-time contribution, you can do that via check or PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.